Hello and welcome. My name is Tom Pesek. I'm the Senior Liaison Officer at the Food and Agriculture Organization's Liaison Office for North America, based in Washington, D.C. And I have the pleasure of serving as your moderator today. We've convened today's webinar to help celebrate World Soil Day 2020, which falls on Saturday, December 5th. This year's World Soil Day theme is Keep Soil Alive, Protect Soil Biodiversity. And it aims to raise awareness of the importance of maintaining healthy ecosystems and human well-being by addressing the growing challenges in soil management, fighting soil biodiversity loss, increasing soil awareness, and encouraging governments, organizations, communities, and individuals around the world to commit to proactively improving soil health. So on behalf of FAO North America, I would like to thank all of you for joining today's webinar. Before proceeding with our program, there are a few important housekeeping items I would like to cover. Firstly, I would like to advise you that this webinar is being recorded and it is also being live streamed on Twitter at FAO North America. And we invite you to join the conversation on Twitter and follow us at FAO North America. Please feel free to let us know who you are and from where you're joining us in the Zoom chat box. And please use the Zoom Q&A box to ask your questions, stating your name and affiliation, if any, and to whom your question is directed. So distinguished and accomplished is our cast of speakers today that I'm left with no choice but to abbreviate my introductions of them due to time constraints. However, their full biographies will be made available to you in the Zoom chat box. Lastly, I would like to provide an outline of how our event today will be structured. In a moment, I will give the floor to my FAO colleague, Vimlendra Sharan, to offer welcoming remarks. Thereafter, we will have the immense good fortune of hearing keynote remarks from one of the world's foremost soil scientists, Dr. Rattan Lal, the 2020 World Food Prize Laureate, and distinguished university professor of soil science and founding director of the Carbon Management and Sequestration Center at The Ohio State University. We will then hear from another FAO colleague, Ronald Vargas, Secretary of the Global Soil Partnership and Land and Water Officer at FAO headquarters in Rome. Thereafter, we will hear from Diana Wall, Director of the School of Global Environmental Sustainability at Colorado State University. Next, we will hear from Michèle Marcotte, Director of Research, Development and Technology at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's Ottawa Research and Development Center. And last but certainly not least, we will hear from David Knaebel, the National Program Leader for Soil Biology at the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Research Service, or ARS, as it is more commonly known. We will then transition to the Q&A segment of our event, at which time I will begin posing questions from you, our audience, to our speakers based on your entries in the Zoom Q&A box. And we will endeavor to end the session on time at 11:15 a.m. Eastern Time. I now have the pleasure of introducing Vimlendra Sharan, Director of FAO's Liaison Office for North America, based in Washington, D.C., to offer welcoming remarks. Vimlendra has served in this role as Director since December 2016, and he came to Washington from Rome after having served as permanent representative of India to the Rome-based Food and Agriculture Agencies of the United Nations. Vimlendra, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Tom, and a very warm welcome to all our participants who have joined this webinar to lend their support to the World Soil Day. I can see from the chat box that people have been joining from all corners of the globe. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, all of you, depending on where you've joined from. As most of you are aware, the World Soil Day is held annually on 5th December as a means to focus attention on the importance of healthy soil and to advocate for the sustainable management of soil resources. An international day to celebrate soil was recommended first by the International Union of Soil Sciences in 2002. And under the leadership of Kingdom of Thailand, And within the framework of the Global Soil Partnership, FAO has supported the formal establishment of World Soil Day as a global awareness raising platform. The FAO conference endorsed the World Soil Day in June of 2013 and requested its official adoption at the 68th UN General Assembly. And in December of 2013, UN General Assembly responded by designating 5th December 2014 as the first official World Soil Day. So that's for the history. Of course, the theme of the World Soil Day celebration changes every year. And as Tom mentioned in his opening remarks, by this year, by addressing the increasing challenges of soil management, the FAO campaign for the year, the theme for the year is to keep soil alive, protect soil biodiversity. It aims to raise awareness of the importance of sustaining healthy ecosystems and human well-being. Loss of soil biodiversity, about which you will definitely hear from all our speakers, including our keynote, Dr. Rattan Lal, is a matter of grave concern. And soil is home to more than 1/4 of our planet's biodiversity. Yet, till date, I think we know just about 1% of their universe, the universe within the soil. They say that there are more living creatures in a single teaspoon of healthy soil than there are people on the earth. Soil organisms, we all know, are responsible for many critical ecosystem processes on which humans depend, from supporting plant growth to storing carbon and being a vast reservoir for pharmaceuticals. To talk on these issues and more, we have with us today this year's Food Laureate and world-renowned soil scientist, Rattan Lal. I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir, as also to all other panelists, Diana Wall, Michèle, and David, and last but not the least, to my FAO colleague and Secretary of the Global Soil Partnership, Ronald Vargas. For one, I'm looking forward to a very engaging conversation and also to a very dynamic engagement with our audience through the Q&A session. So let me stop here and pass the baton back to Tom to take the event forward. Tom.
Thank you very much, Vimlendra, for getting us started with those excellent welcoming remarks. I now have the great pleasure and honor of introducing Dr. Rattan Lal. Dr. Lal, I would like to congratulate you once again on being awarded the 2020 World Food Prize in recognition of your pioneering research on the restoration of soil health across the world in Africa, Asia, and Latin America and beyond, and for your critically important work in developing and mainstreaming a soil-centric approach to increasing food production that conserves natural resources and also mitigates climate change. Dr. Lal, as many of you know, is the Distinguished University Professor of Soil Science and Director of the Carbon Management and Sequestration Center at The Ohio State University, as well as Adjunct Professor at the University of Iceland and Punjab Agricultural University. He was President of the World Association of Soil and Water Conservation, International Soil and Tillage Research Organization, Soil Science Society of America, and the International Union of Soil Sciences. Dr. Lal is one of the world's most prolific agricultural scientists with more than 112,000 citations. He has authored almost 1,000 journal articles, authored and/or edited more than 100 books, and he has mentored 360 researchers. I would be remiss if I neglected to mention that Dr. Lal has been a treasured friend and colleague of the Food and Agriculture Organization for nearly half a century. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, I invite you to visit the Zoom chat box should you wish to see a more complete account of Dr. Lal's remarkable accomplishments in and contributions to the field of soil science. Without further ado, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. And I want to thank you, Tom, as well as Dr. Sharan for inviting me. I trust you can see the screen. The World Soil Day, as has already been mentioned, in October 2002, the International Union of Soil Science adopted a resolution proposing what would become World Soil Day. And the resolution was intended to celebrate the importance of soil as a critical component of the natural system and as a vital contributor to human well-being. Why 5th of December? The 2002 World Congress of Soil Science was held in Bangkok, Thailand, and inaugurated by His Majesty the King Bhumibol Atulyatej, the then King of Thailand, late King of Thailand now. And this date of 5th of December was chosen by IUSS to honor the birthday of the king, who officially sanctioned the event. As already mentioned, in December 2013, FAO GSP unanimously endorsed the World Soil Day and requested official adoption at the 68th UN General Assembly. I really commend FAO for doing that. IUSS could not have done it on its own. The 68th UN General Assembly in December 2013 declared 5th of December then as the World Soil Day. I would like to mention that our scriptures also talk about, does not matter what faith you belong to, the word Adam, man, is derived from the Hebrew word Adamah, meaning earth or soil. That is the closest link that you can ever find. The Homo sapien, the word homo, is derived from the Latin word humus, or the decomposed organic matter in soil, which of course is the essence of all terrestrial life. And the soil life nexus is recognized because of the biodiversity in the soil. Soil is indeed a living entity. It is a habitat for 25% of all terrestrial biodiversity. Dr. Diana Wall will be talking to us in more detail. However, land misuse and soil mismanagement is a serious threat to soil health and biodiversity. Therefore, the objective of management is to enhance and strengthen soil's capacity to support life. And soil organic matter content is the basic component determinant of soil health and its capacity to support ecosystem services. I like to define soil health in my own definition that I published in 2016. And I defined it in view of the context facing global issues at the moment. As a soil's capacity as dynamic and biologically active entity within natural managed landscape to sustain multiple ecosystem services, including net primary productivity, food and nutrition security, biodiversity, water purification and renewability, carbon sequestration, air quality and atmospheric chemistry, and elemental cycling for both human well-being and nature conservancy. It is not
Dr.
just
Lal,
human being. Yes.
please forgive me for interrupting you. We're not seeing your screen. Are you able to share it?
Oh, yes, I thought I was. Okay. That's why I asked you beginning. So do you want me to begin again?
No, I think we can.
Okay. All right. Let's try again. I thought this. Can you see now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I will probably skip defining the World Soil Day, which was already done. So I won't go into that. So I'll probably begin with soil and civilization. The word Adam, derived from the Hebrew word Adamah, meaning earth and soil. The word homo, part of the Homo sapien definition, derived from the Latin word humus, or the decomposed organic matter, and therefore the strong link between soil as a living entity containing 25% of all terrestrial biodiversity. Land misuse and soil mismanagement is a serious threat to biodiversity and soil's ecosystem services. Therefore, the objective of the soil management is to improve soil organic matter content and thus soil health. I was then defining soil health, soil's capacity as a dynamic and biologically active entity within natural managed landscape to sustain multiple ecosystem services, including net primary productivity, food and nutrition security, biodiversity, water purification, renewability, carbon sequestration, air quality, atmospheric chemistry, elemental cycling for both human well-being and nature conservancy. I like to mention nature conservancy specifically. The definition normally talks about human well-being. I think we cannot ignore nature. Soil health is connected intimately with plant health, animal health, human health, environmental health, and of course, the planetary health. That's the idea of the concept, the health of soil, plants, animal, people, environment, and the planet is one and indivisible. Therefore, in addition to the socioeconomic factors affecting food security, the nutritional and food issue research must also address environmental resource management and their sustainability. That means soil health. And because soil health then, as will be defined by many colleagues, it also moderates, mitigates, adapts, stabilizes climate change. Of course, food quantity and quality, above ground and below ground biodiversity, water resources, quality and quantity. And in that sense, soil health is the engine of economic development. In this era, agriculture has a bright future. In fact, very bright future, contrary to the very pessimistic views. More changes will occur between 2020 and 2050 than have happened over the past 12,000 years since the onset of settled agriculture. And carbon in soil and trees, through the process of recarbonization of the soil and the biosphere, farming carbon will become a new crop that in fact has a trading commodification value in the market. That brings me to the question of regenerative agriculture. The idea is to restore soil health through agriculture, where agriculture becomes a solution. And therefore, in that context, regenerative agriculture is inspired by eco-innovation, powered by non-carbon energy, driven by a circular economy and green infrastructure, supported by the recarbonization of the terrestrial biosphere as the bedrock of sustainable development through eco-intensification. In that context, regenerative agriculture is a system-based system, cropping system, farming system, agriculture system that reconcile the need to produce adequate and nutritious food with the absolute necessity of restoring the environment, and thereby making agriculture a solution to environmental issues through eco-intensification and producing more from less. The idea is producing more from less land, less water, less input of fertilizer and pesticides, less input of energy, less emission of carbon, so that we can save land, water, natural resources for nature. Right now, 5 billion hectare land under agriculture, of which 1.5 billion hectare is for cropland, is far too much. If we manage land properly, if we improve soil health, we can return quite a lot land and water to nature. How much? We have right now 700 million hectare under cereal production. With bridging the yield gap, improving soil health, we should reduce it over time to something like 600 million hectare by 2050, maybe 500 million hectare, no more, no additional land. Fertilizer use right now, 200 million hectare. If we improve the efficiency of use, we can certainly reduce the rate of application. The idea is to decrease the rate, improve the efficiency. Water the same way. Right now we use practically 3,200 kilometer cube per year for irrigation. We can use drip, sub-irrigation, micro-irrigation, conserve water, reduce the total water consumption, especially in aquifers such as Ogallala, Indus Valley Aquifer, North China Plain. Many of them being depleted rapidly, excessively by overutilization for irrigation purposes. Use the best by the best method, save the rest for nature. That brings me to the question of farming carbon, which means growing soil carbon as a farm commodity that can be traded, bought and sold, and create another income stream for farmers. And at what rate can you buy and sell? The societal value of carbon. What are the ecosystem services it creates? That's not the same value as in Chicago Climate Exchange, which depends on market demand and supply. There's a lot of supply, but no demand. So the inherent value of soil carbon has been estimated $130 per ton, $35 per ton of CO2, which means if a farmer sequesters half a ton of carbon per hectare, $65 per hectare, $26 per acre. If a farmer sequesters $33, one third of a ton per hectare, it's $43 per hectare or $18 per acre. That's the inherent value. That brings me the question of rights of soil. If soil is a living thing, which we think it is, 1/4 of all the biodiversity lives in soil. A healthy soil contains 5 tons of biomass carbon. Then soil, like any other living thing, human, animals, panda, butterfly, whatever, it must also have rights. Rights to be protected, rights to be restored, rights to thrive, and rights to manage judiciously. Simply because you own it does not give anybody a right to demolish it, destroy it, or degrade it. And that's the idea of rights of soil. In the US EPA has a Water Quality Act, Air Quality Act, no Soil Quality Act. Is it really possible to have clean water, clean air without having healthy soil? I think that's a question need to be addressed. So if asked, what would I suggest to mitigate global warming, purify air, water, and end global hunger and malnutrition? The logical response would be to change the way soils are taken for granted and abused to produce, transport, process, and consume food, and misused to procure feed, fiber, fuel, bricks, and other ecosystem services. Therefore, a prudent strategy would imply making soil, water, and agriculture an integral part of the solution and empowering farmers and land managers to produce more and more from less and less by reducing waste, increasing the eco-efficiency, restoring degraded soil, afforesting the denuded lands, and saving soil and water for nature, not abusing it. In fact, the world peace depends on soil health. If soils are not restored, and those who have dared to jump through the Mediterranean and pass through many other hurdles can verify this concept, because if the soil does not support them, if they are not restored, crops will fail, even if rains do not. Hunger will perpetuate, even with the emphasis on biotechnology and genetically modified crops. Civil strife and political instability will plague the developing world, even with sermons on human rights and democratic ideals. And humanity will suffer, even with great scientific strides. Political stability and global peace are threatened because of soil degradation, because of food insecurity and desperateness. Therefore, the time to act is now, today, the World Soil Day. I believe that degrading soils and denuding landscape, recurring drought and intensifying heat waves, low crop yield and perpetual hunger, poor nutrition, increasing malnourishment, marginal living, and desperateness are the biggest threat to global peace and security. These are the weapons of mass destruction. We have 25,000 people dying per day because of hunger-related death. That is 17 per minute. And that is the issue that need to be discussed by the United Nations. I have promoted as a president of IUSS a slogan, in soil we trust. And I think that's the slogan which is very appropriate today for the World Soil Day. I wish you all a very, very happy, safe, and healthy Soil Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lal, for those enlightening words and that rich historical account of the origins and evolution of World Soil Day and your discussion on the future of agriculture and the importance of soil health in enabling farmers to grow more with less. You've provided an excellent foundation, fertile ground, if you will, for our discussion here today. I now have the great pleasure of introducing Ronald Vargas. Ronald is a soil scientist with more than 15 years of experience in natural resource management with a focus on sustainable soil management for food security and ecosystem services. He joined FAO in 2011 as a land and water officer, and he has served as the secretary of the Global Soil Partnership since its establishment in 2012. Ronald, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tom, and I just want to congratulate you for organizing this World Soil Day celebration. Greetings to all our colleagues, very distinguished colleagues that are presenting today. And indeed, as Professor Lal said, well, the World Soil Day has quite a long journey already. So there are many years, but in order to be a UN Day, well, there was a lot of efforts from all the soil science community, and luckily now we can have this day, and every year the observance in the number of countries is increasing. So we are very glad for that, not because we like soils and we are happy with soils, but we believe that soils can contribute to all the issues that we are currently facing. So I would like to make a presentation regarding the soil biodiversity report that we will be launching on Friday, where we have the World Soil celebration in FAO headquarters. Let me share my screen, please. Okay, so today is a premiere because in theory we will be launching this report on Friday, but we will start now. So we will be launching the state of knowledge of soil biodiversity, status, challenges, and potentialities. And this is the result of a collaborative approach with more than 300 soil scientists, because not only soil scientists, there are many ecologists, etc., that were brought together by FAO, the Global Soil Partnership, the Intergovernmental Technical Panel on Soils, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative, Diana is here and will present later on, and the European Commission. So basically, well, Professor Lal already illustrated all of this, and if we want to say the issues and challenges, and of course, as we are the UN, this can contribute directly to the Sustainable Development Goals. Many of these ecosystem services are invisible to people, and that's why they don't value or appreciate it, and that's why we really need to make them visible so that they understand that our life depends on this. Soil biodiversity, well, people talk a lot about biodiversity, protecting many animals, plants, etc., but rarely we talk about the organisms that are below our feet, many of them invisible. We need microscope to look at them. So all this variety of life there in the soil, from genes to species, is what we call soil biodiversity. And especially we are very interested on the functions that they perform. As I said, they can start from microscopic organisms, and we can start zooming out in order to look at them and see the diversity And of course, the functions that they play are very important. Some of them are decomposers, some others are more engineers creating the soil porosity, etc. But all of them are really genius creators that help us to deal with the soil functions that our soils offer. As you can see here, we are talking about millions of different species of bacteria, termites, earthworms, etc. But still, you will not believe that we approximately know around 1% or even more, but not much of that is known. Scientists are studying it, and still we have a lot of work to do, right? And especially if we consider that from all biodiversity, soil biodiversity constitutes approximately 25% of this global biodiversity. Why is so important? It is very important because all these organisms are part of the vast food web that cycles energy and nutrients, okay? And they are responsible for essential ecosystem services that soils provide. Many of them are listed here, starting with soil formation, soil structure, carbon transformation, nutrient cycle, biological regulation, production of these different products like food, fiber, etc., bioremediation, but also human health, which is very important for all of us. And if we talk about agriculture, of course, you see on the left the traditional approach, but if we go in line with nature and we use soil biodiversity, we will be avoiding the use of artificial or synthetic agrochemicals that are needed for doing agriculture. Also, the biological control, because don't forget that some of these species can bring some, or they can born some diseases for some crops. In terms of human health, well, the soil is the origin of very important antibiotics that helped a lot in fighting some illnesses in the past, but still they are subject to studies of new pharmaceutical products. But also, just allowing our children, for instance, to go and play with soil, they can boost their immunity because soils have many natural antibiotics and many other elements that help them to be better. But what we have challenges ahead because unfortunately the loss of soil biodiversity is one of the global soil threats, and unsustainable soil management practices are hindering this soil biodiversity, which is one of our, let's say, treasures. Pollution constitutes a huge threat, not only from industry, but as I said, from all the inputs that we are having into our soils. Waste disposal, for instance, constitutes a huge issue with plastic, but with other number of chemicals, erosion, urbanization, etc. So we need to be careful and we need to act. Soil biodiversity, being a nature-based solution, still has been a very academic and research field. What we need is now to move into action and scale it up as a solution to all those problems. And for this, we need to enhance our information systems, try to have soil biodiversity across soil surveys as a very important topic. We need to strengthen all the groups, starting from microbes, micro, meso, macro, and mega fauna, and not only focusing on some of them. We need that the current 2030 agenda and the post-2020 biodiversity agenda incorporate soil biodiversity as a very important topic, because otherwise we will be missing 25% of the biodiversity. And very important to clarify that above ground biodiversity and below ground are very much connected, and they two cannot be separated. Very important considerations also is the need of investment, not only in research, but especially on scaling up already successful results like bioremediation, biofertilizers, etc. The potentials are huge in many fields, as I show already, food security and food safety, because don't forget that we want safe crops to eat, and they should be free of pathogens and free of contaminants. We want to reinforce and look for alternatives for the biological control of pests and diseases. So we need to start from there, and that's soil biodiversity. Pollution is a huge topic nowadays, and bioremediation offers a very important alternative. When talking about climate change, our friends are the microorganisms, because they are the ones who decompose everything that comes there. So we need to be in line with them. And human health through the microbiome still needs to be further studied, but there is already evidence that we can contribute. A way forward is presented in the report, and we will be working together with all these institutions and organizations in order to implement these actions that we are listing here. We really hope that with this, soil biodiversity will become the real nature-based solution that it is. But we really need first recognize it and support it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ronald, thank you for making time to join us during what we all know is an extremely busy week for you in the run-up to World Soil Day on December 5th. And thank you for that excellent overview of FAO's work on soils and on the importance of soil health and soil biodiversity. I now have the great pleasure of introducing Diana Wall, who is a renowned ecologist and environmental scientist recognized for her research exploring soil biodiversity and ecosystem functioning in many ecosystems from the Amazon to Antarctica. Diana is currently scientific chair of the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative. She received the 2013 Tyler Prize for Environmental Achievement and was honored with the 2017 Eminent Ecologist, Ecological Society of America, and many, 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 many other awards and distinctions, which you can see for yourself in the Zoom chat box. Diana is also currently the director of the School of Global Environmental Sustainability and University Distinguished Professor at Colorado State University. Diana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tom. Let's see. I'm having a little trouble sharing my screen. There we go. Thank you. Thanks very much. I want to follow up on the excellent speeches we've heard so far. It's been a pleasure for me to be part of this, just to hear this panel speak today. I want to start out with this report just in thanking all the scientists, along with all the support from the various agencies who have made this report possible. This is a landmark. This is the first ever global soil biodiversity assessment, the status of knowledge of what do we know about soil biodiversity. And I think this is only possible because we have made so many advances in the last 10 to 15, maybe even 20 years, where we are able to share our knowledge, where we have new technologies that allow us to use molecular tools to explore the biodiversity below ground at very distinct levels, not only for our human health, but also because we're looking for connections to other species and how they survive and what they do when they're threatened and what do they do in a landscape. So I think this report is a landmark, and I think that it shows an awareness that not only do we need to know about the individual organisms, but that we need to know it because we've recognized the linkage to human health, and as Rattan Lal pointed out, to all health. It's not only soil health, it's animal health, human health, plant health, and our planet that we breathe. So I'll go to the next slide, and let's see. I seem to to not have very good control of it. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to, this is kind of a short version of what Ronald just talked about that's in this report. And it follows on what it does provide for us. You could look at all these and you may walk away and not really think about them, but let's face it, if we didn't have living soil, living healthy soil, with dynamic organisms with all sorts of life cycles, microbes and animals, lots of animals in the soil, we would see that we can't, as humans or animals, drink, eat. We can't be healthy. We're all dependent on the terra firma below our feet. And so I think that these various different parts of the ecosystem services that we know are provided by the organisms below ground are perhaps, maybe we're used to them. But secondly, I would like to say that one of the advances that I think science has shown recently has been that these organisms below ground have many functions. They don't do just one thing. They're multifunctional. So they may be working on pathogen regulation. At the same time, they're also contributing to soil fertility or to climate regulation by helping to store carbon. And so there's a new look in science at the multifunctions that are provided by the organisms below ground. And if I could have the next slide. I think one of the things we've also been able to do in the past years that lead to this, whoops, go back one, that we've been able to do in the past is look at how management occurs not only in agriculture, but on all terrestrial land. And this is a paper that shows the mismatches in where we see above ground biodiversity and where we see below ground. And in this analysis, it shows that the turquoise areas are the highest in soil biodiversity, but I think I've got that right, and the yellow is where we know more about above ground diversity and how much there is there. And so we're managing on what we see above ground when it may not exactly be a straight comparison below ground, that everything you see above ground is going to be a great hotspot of diversity below ground. So even in our natural soils, we see gaps in our knowledge. We see that, like we found out for above ground biodiversity, if you travel down a highway and you sample what the plant species off to the left or the insects or the birds, that does not tell you about a vast acreage across the world that may have some very interesting species. We know that not all species are everywhere. And it's the exploration of these microbiomes in soil and of the animals in soil and how they interact that is helping us get these ecosystem services. I think another thing that the report points out, that not only do we need to look at the gaps of where things are so we know how to better manage them, find them, what are the biocontrol agents in various places, but also what's going on with carbon sequestration in different types of communities of soil animals. But we also need to, and this has been mentioned a couple of times, consider monitoring. This is biodiversity below ground. We're seeing above ground a loss of species. We're seeing a loss of endemic species. Below ground, we are seeing the same thing. It's just harder to track. So in the next slide, I'd just like to mention the soil bond. It's part of GeoBond. And this is one of many networks or observation networks worldwide that wants to make it just basically wants to have a multinational conglomeration or collaboration and know what other people are doing in terms of observation networks. And in particular, in this one, we're looking at how does climate change in soils affect the species that are there? Is it more rapid that we lose species? Do we see a dominance of particular species that might be pests or pathogens? What is the outlook for soils in both nature conservation areas as well as in agriculture? And I noted that the EU Soil Observatory started today, and I noted that Ronald has one of the bullets of where we need to go is to have a network like Soil Bond for North America is what I'm thinking. He had one for Global Biodiversity Network. So there are a number of these networks coming. We need them. We need them quickly because we need to be able to predict and use the models. And more models are coming where they use soil fauna as well as microbes to look at how soil carbon, how clean water, all these ecosystem services. And I think that I will just close with the next slide, please, that shows that the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative has been working with scientists. Basically, we're a group of scientists worldwide that are very interested in all aspects of soil biodiversity, from the molecular to the landscape level. We're also looking at traits. You know, what do the different organisms have? We have taxonomists to biogeochemists to geochemists, because how can you describe a soil habitat for a tiny organism in the soil unless you have other disciplines helping us to describe what is there and what are the changes that are ongoing. And so I too agree with both Ronald and Rattan that we have a lot to look forward to. We must, and I would say this, move urgently, because soils are being destroyed, and with them, we are losing soil biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana, for that outstanding overview and for those important insights. I would now like to introduce Michèle Marcotte, who is the Director of Research, Development and Technology at the Science and Technology Branch of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, based at the Ottawa Research and Development Centre at the Central Experimental Farm. And again, for the sake of time, I will not go into her full and enormously impressive biography, but instead invite you to view it for yourself in the chat box. And Michèle will address for us Canada's perspective and priorities on soil biodiversity and soil health. Without further ado, Michèle, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, afternoon, or night, wherever you are. As a FAO member country, Canada has been participating to the global partnership since its creation in 2012. It is only until recently that the soil biological functions are being actively researched and where much more work is required. Canada highly values the work of the GSP as well as the work of a number of other scientific and technical bodies at FAO, supported by FAO. We consider that this type of work is a key contribution that the FAO makes to global systems and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, and we support FAO resources being directed to them. AFC, Science and Technology Branch, participation in the Global Science Partnership and collaboration with international partners on common soil issues demonstrates ongoing leadership in research and the provision of accessible, current, accurate, and relevant soils information. The study of biodiversity has become central to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's research activities as science started uncovering the important interconnections between biodiversity and agricultural productivity and resilience. Within the branch, the Biodiversity and Bioresources Science Strategy was established to answer questions like what organisms we have, where they are, where they come from, how to use them, how to eradicate them, how they interact, etc. This is of crucial importance for soil biodiversity. Canada has a strong history of working on soil, particularly at agriculture, mainly addressing its physical and chemical component as impacted by best management practices. It is only recently that there has been an increasing interest in studying the biological component of soil. And we have built research capacity in soil ecology, fertility, microbiome, and biodiversity as it relates to agriculture. Soil degradation, soil erosion, and the need for more information on the role and importance of soil biodiversity are an ongoing issues that threaten the productive capacity of Canada's soil and our sector's competitiveness. As of January 2020, there are 86 active research projects on biodiversity, which include plants, animals, soil, and water, for an investment of $45 million. Related to soils, recent examples are development of genomic indicator of sustainability, the consolidation of sequencing data sets, and the facilitation of interoperability within Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and with international initiatives, working collaboratively to establish genomic markers as basis for agricultural soil sustainability indicators. Addressing soil biodiversity is complex, multifaceted, and challenging. There's currently an explosion of soil biodiversity research using DNA sequencing technology. Environmental DNA collected from soil sample can be analyzed using high-throughput DNA sequencing methods known as metagenomic, metabarcoding, and single species detections to allow for rapid measurements and monitoring of soil biodiversity. Access to DNA sequencing data from a variety of samples makes a critical contribution to the understanding of population size, distribution, and population dynamics for species in soil that are not well documented. In 2006, the Canadian federal government announced that it will provide $30 million over 6 years to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada to support advanced research in agricultural genomics to accelerate the DNA analysis and digital recording of the department's biological collections of over 19 million physical specimens of insects, plants, fungi, bacteria, and nematodes. More than 40% of this budget relates to the DNA sequencing and barcoding of specimens and accession in collections that are high priority organisms to agriculture. Linking to soil biodiversity research, and until 2022, agriculture is currently leading a federal government genomic research and development initiative, Share Priority Project, comprising 8 departments and agencies, which has led to the establishment of an environmental genomics platform to better assess, monitor, and remediate microbial and invertebrate biodiversity in soil and aquatic ecosystems. Metagenomic approaches are used to profile microbial and invertebrate communities in varying Canadian habitats tied to water and soil. In 2019, Canada completed the national survey on the state of knowledge on soil biodiversity, covering its current status, challenges, and potentialities. Through the GSP, 6 experts provided input, and their response detailed the importance of fungal, invertebrates, and bacterial biodiversity in Canadian soil, sharing and citing a wide variety of publications on related topics. Canada is pleased with the fact that the FAO Soil Biodiversity Report will be released and officially unveiled on December 5th at the World Soil Day. Soil, but most importantly, organisms in the soil are providing essential function for ecosystems to thrive. Canada is leading the research on the use of sequencing technology, DNA barcoding, for a better understanding of soil biodiversity. In closing, I would like to sincerely thank FAO and the other organizer, as it was a pleasure to reach out to the soil biodiversity community of practice. And as was repeated by by the experts here, connecting the various disciplines that border on topics related to soil biodiversity areas is a very important first step. And that will be critical for us making progress in that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michèle, for sharing Canada's perspective and priorities on these important issues with us. I now have the pleasure of introducing Dave Knaebel, who serves as the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Agriculture Research Service National Program Leader for Soil Biology. He co-leads the Soil and Air National Program, a portfolio of 20 projects across the United States, conducting critical research to understand the soil, air, farm, and agro-ecosystem and develop solutions to current and emerging natural resources and production agriculture problems. And among many other roles and responsibilities, Dave also serves as the North American chair of Pillar 3 of the UN FAO Global Soil Partnership. Dave, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will share my screen. So this is a pleasure and a treat to be here with you all at this wonderful day of celebration and of science. I think what we're going to see today in my little sharing is something very consistent with what's been shared by the other speakers. And my challenge was to provide you with an overview of U.S. federal government research into soil health. And I will speak to that. One of the issues is that I work with the USDA, and I have worked with others who conduct soil research, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the FDA, the Forest Service, the Department of Interior, all of whom are working on soil research to meet their own mission space needs, but they're all complementary to the questions and challenges that have been raised earlier today of how do we conduct research to understand these systems and then to better manage them for the outcomes we're interested in. And so what I want to share about ARS is we are the largest intramural agency or research agency of the USDA. Our sister agency, the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, is the extramural funding agency that supports other researchers and other organizations and universities. ARS is a problem-solving organization. We seek to solve problems of importance to agriculture across the entire landscape. And as such, we provide those research answers to policymakers, to producers, and to other entities, but ARS is not a policy setting agency. We do work closely with the Natural Resources and Conservation Service, who might be considered the implementers of the science that ARS conducts. So we try to conduct our science and then hand it off to other entities such as NRCS and others who can then help with producer and NGO and other entity implementation. And now what I'd like to do is shift into some of our perspectives and priorities that I think you will see that align very nicely with what's been shared before and the challenges before us, and then give you a couple snapshots of some of the research that we're conducting that tie into the challenges of stress to the environment that's been mentioned, the soil environment, as well as the climate change. So as we shared, the definition of soil health elicits such a wide-ranging set of concepts and phenomena that we must address to understand what is happening in our soils. And we really want to try to seek to understand those systems in agriculture, but they also range, as has been shared, from the Amazon to the Antarctic, different states of stability and complexity. Our focus in ARS is on the agricultural production system and what we can understand about that system from the soil health perspective, but also the ties to atmospheric emissions, to groundwater quality, other water quality settings, so that we can help our farmers and producers be more productive and sustainable, and also be resilient to pests and then climate change and what that might be doing to our agricultural soils. Our priorities are to take what I would say is we have made headway in understanding the soil microbiome and the soil ecosystem. What might have been considered a black box before isn't a black box anymore. We ought to have some understanding because of the fine science that we've conducted and our partners. And so I've called it a gray box, and I'm not sure that's the best word, but what we all want is a transparent box, that we understand the players, the phenomenon at all sorts of scales, so that we can take that understanding and translate it into management, again, for agriculture that lead to those outcomes we're interested in. And our sister agencies and other agencies in the US federal government are interested in the same kinds of outcomes. How do we treat or manage those systems to promote the beneficial outcomes we want and reduce the negative ones we don't want? And now I'm just going to jump into, again, these two small examples of a wide portfolio of research. And at the end, I'll give you some links to our national program website and to our new national program action plan that sets the stage for the next 5 years. But this is a wonderful a network of research that was conducted on the Soil Health Assessment Initiative with our partners at NRCS. You can see on the left the plot locations across the United States where hundreds of samples were taken to evaluate soil health indicators along with what indicators of stress we could use or to define, and then what those systems are also experiencing as far as agronomic productivity or not productivity. And so on the right, you can see some of the measures that were evaluated, and these are what correlated with those stress indicators or with the agronomic outcomes. So on the top, you can see soil organic matter cycling and biomass and some genes that are associated with that. And if you read down the list, these other indicators of the states or processes of soils that we tie into soil health that were discovered during this process. And at the bottom, and this will be posted, there's a link for the context of that research and who the authors were and how to get in touch with them. Again, just one example of a large portfolio that ties into stress to agronomic soils or agricultural soils. The other is one that's related to something we're facing with water limitation and what happens under deficit irrigation with maize production. And the study done here was to evaluate what happened to the soil microbial communities. And under different levels of irrigation, you can see on the right side, the changes in the microbial community structure shifted because of over time as far as what happened when the water to those systems was reduced. We don't know what the implications of these are yet, but this is an ongoing study and we're continuing to look at that. And these are just two examples of, again, a wide portfolio. I mentioned, or was mentioned earlier, there are 20 projects, but about 40 scientists within the National Program 212, the Soil and Air National Program. But our soils efforts are spread across our natural resources groups and even into other national program areas across ARS. And so I want to thank you and then provide some links so that you can reach out either to us or to our other teams. You can also find our links to our science there through the TELUS location, my contact information, and then also the contact of Brian Norrington, who is the director of our Office of International Research Engagement Cooperation. Because there are so many international participants for this meeting, I want to make sure you had his contact information as well. And so thank you for listening. I appreciate the time to be here and share what we're doing and what the US federal government is doing along with the other participants in this important research area. Thank you very much.
Dave, thank you very much for that very comprehensive overview of the US government's work and perspective and priorities around soil health. To the audience, you've been very patient, but also very engaged. For those of you who've had a chance to consult the Q&A box on Zoom, you'll see that there have been quite a number of excellent questions posed to our speakers. And I would like to pose to our keynote speaker, Dr. Lal, two related questions. And after inviting him to respond to them, I would like to ask Diana, Michèle, and Dave each to very briefly respond to these as well. The first question comes from Michael Onchabo, and he is interested in hearing from Dr. Lal about how soil carbon is paid, since so much is used to carbon credits for trees, and how does this work for soil? And a secondary and related question comes from Julie Howard from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, who, in follow-up to Michael's question, has asked if Dr. Lal could review the state of play on measuring soil carbon. And she notes that that will be critical to establishing a market and payment system.
Thank you. May I briefly respond? And I think my colleagues, Dr. Wall and others, can really also add much better information. How soil carbon is paid right now, the ecosystem services payment is not happening. Industry has fortunately started. Indigo, I think, is paying or suggesting to pay $10 per ton on the basis of the technology that the farmers adopt. There are a few other industries following that, but the payment for ecosystem services from the government is not yet happening. Hopefully it will happen. I was suggesting the price of $35 per ton of CO2. Indigo, I mentioned $10. I think European market is 25 euro. That comes to very close to what I was proposing. So that depends on the second question, how do you monitor soil carbon? Well, conventionally, soil carbon is monitored by dry combustion method. New technology has been developed for measurement. INS, inelastic neutron scattering, developed by Brookhaven National Lab, monitors soil carbon stock. LIBS, laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, developed by Los Alamos National Lab, is another option. There are quite a few other things which are in the process. For example, Microsoft has developed Wi-Fi system to monitor soil moisture content. The idea is if we can extend that technology to monitor soil carbon, so that's an option. There are modeling techniques, many of them, Century, Epix, SeaQuest, USDA had developed some. So there are many options, but we do not need to wait. There is a data available from most land-grant university systems which have monitored rates of carbon sequestration on the basis of long-term experiment. So we can apply that information. So the chances are that the new, I think it's called Climate Resolution Act, being discussed by the US Senate since June, July. Maybe Dr. David Knaebel may know more about it. I hope that will also lead to formalization of this process of payment for ecosystem services. Thank you. Both good questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lal. I would now like to invite our other speakers to respond, should they wish, to either of those questions, going in order. First, inviting Diana, followed by Michèle, and then last but not least, Dave. In about 30 seconds to a minute each, please feel free to respond. Diana.
Mine will be very easy. I knew very little about the economics of carbon sequestration. I'm very familiar with the models and what they're doing there, and can put somebody in touch with some of those people, but there's a lot of methods, as Rattan said.
Thank you, Diana. Michèle, over to you.
I'm now muted. I have the same position as Diana. I know very little about carbon payment. However, we are using long-term experiments all across Canada and getting the data there. But I would need to really look at put in contact some of the people together in order to really discuss this carbon payment.
Thank you, Michèle. Dave.
Yes, there's a high degree of interest in payment for carbon within the US and other countries. The USDA ARS is conducting research to evaluate some of those options, but we don't have answers yet. There's the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium that is very interested in addressing the best ways to measure carbon, and then over time, how do you pay out to carbon? But again, those decisions have not been made to my knowledge. Actually, I'm fairly certain they have not been made. So it's a great need, and as Dr. Lal shared, carbon farming is something we need to really implement so we can get more benefit to our producers and to those who manage lands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. I would now like to pose a question to all our speakers, anyone who wishes to field it, which comes from Kate Carestes, and I apologize if I've mispronounced your name, Kate, but Kate is asking what effects on soil health and human food security there are, especially in a smallholder system. Does boosting soil concentrations of microorganisms such as fungi have? And perhaps we'll go in reverse order. And Dave, if you have any response to that, followed by Michèle, Diana, and then Dr. Lal in about 30 seconds, please.
There's generally a good correlation between microbial diversity and food productivity, but it needs to be teased apart. The fungi you might promote may be beneficial and promote growth. Some of those may be also pathogens that may cause problems. So it's a complex soil health question. So I'm glad somebody else will be taking over.
And then Michèle, followed by Diana, if you have anything further to contribute.
It's a fertile area to establish these correlations right now. I'm not sure we have all the answers, but definitely it's a very, very fertile area for active research.
Thank you. And Diana, Dr. Lal, if you have anything further to contribute, otherwise we can move to the next question.
I would just say that this is a time when we don't want to throw out the old data and the experiments that we've done in the past. This is also a time that we can, try to bring together the networks of data that we have on places and the types of fungi that have already been examined, not only just in scientific papers, but in a network that we can put out to the public and say, okay, here's when we added it, it wasn't enough to make the soil more healthy. And so I'll just stop at that. We need to use old and new data in data sets, put them together and integrate them.
Thank you, Diana. Dr. Lal, anything from your side?
Very briefly, I do not know much about fungus. I think Diana answered that really much better. Organic matter content optimum range is between 1.5% carbon to 2% carbon. Organic matter content 3% to 4% for optimum crop production. And the micronutrient deficiencies in soil, degraded soil has very serious problem. And that actually does translate into micronutrient content in the food and therefore human health.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lal, and to our other speakers as well. We're running a bit short on time, but I would like to be ambitious if I can. And what I would like to propose is that I pose one final question to all of our speakers, and if you could try to answer it in about 30 seconds or less. But then after this next and final question, I would like to turn to each of our speakers and invite you to share with our audience a final takeaway message. If there was one key message you would like to leave our audience with today, what would that be? So starting with the final question and then going across to ask for your final key takeaway message. The last question, and there are many, and I apologize that we won't get to the others, but this question comes from Professor Soha Mustafa from the Department of Microbiology, the Agricultural Research Center in Egypt. And the question is that soil biodiversity is always threatened by several pollution sources as well as climate change. Do you think it's time for, do you think it's time to create a global strategy to save soil fertility and biodiversity? If we could start from the top, beginning with Dr. Lal and then ending with Dave. And again, if you could briefly respond, and if you don't have a response, that's fine.
I think it's important to have a national and global soil protection charter and implement it. We cannot take soil resources for granted. So anything that will protect soil is a good idea.
Thank you so much. Diana?
I agree with that.
Excellent. Thank you, Michèle. And then Dave?
I also agree with that.
I will say, as ARS is a non-policy setting agency, I really can't speak to that so much, but I can say that I think that there's an important aspect of studying those stressed environments and finding the organisms that are surviving or thriving in those and learning what we can about how they're doing and see if there's a way to translate that to other soils that may be impacted by similar events, climate change or other degradation. So I think there's a research opportunity there. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being concise, but also specific. So as I mentioned, I would now, as we near the end of our session, I would like to ask each of our speakers to share with our audience a final key takeaway message. And if I could, I would like to again go in order with Dr. Lal, followed by Diana, Michèle, and then Dave. And again, if you could please try within about 30 seconds to a minute each. Dr. Lal.
Thank you. We produce 3 gigatons of food grains, and 1 gigaton out of that does not reach any stomach, human or animal. Food wastage is a crime against soil and nature. We must stop it. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Diana.
I would say that soil biodiversity, based on this first ever Global Soil Biodiversity Report, is important not only for agricultural policies, but also for all biodiversity policies and reports that are coming out and needs to be included for better management of land.
Excellent. Thank you, Diana. Michèle, over to you.
Soil biodiversity is multifaceted and challenging, connecting the various disciplines that border on topics related to soil biodiversity is crucial.
Excellent. Thank you, Michèle. And Dave.
Based on the great participation we've had globally and across organizations here, I want to say that we must work together to help everyone appreciate the power of soil and the microbial communities and ecosystems within them to help our world for food, water, and climate stability.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you to all our speakers for being, again, very, very concise. And to our audience, I hope you've all enjoyed this program as much as I have. I think that we've covered a great deal of territory and learned quite a lot in just 1 hour and 15 minutes. In particular, I think we learned from Dr. Lal about how our understanding of the importance of soil health and of a soil-centric approach to agriculture has evolved and grown over time. And we learned about the importance of soil biodiversity and the critical role that soil can play in helping producers to grow more with less, both now and well into the future. And from Ronald, who unfortunately had to leave us because of another speaking engagement, we learned about FAO's work on soil and about the findings of the report on the state of knowledge of soil biodiversity, covering its current status, challenges, and potentialities, which will be officially launched later this week. And from Diana Wall, we learned even more about why this landmark report is so important and timely, as it provides the first ever assessment of global soil biodiversity. And we learned that soil is linked to and important for all life, a point also made by Dr. Lal. And lastly, Diana underscored for us the urgency to act now to protect soil biodiversity. And from Michèle Marcotte, we learned about Canada's perspective, activities, priorities, and work surrounding soil biodiversity and soil health. And Michèle really helped us to connect the dots on what are often complex issues surrounding soil health and soil biodiversity. And of course, last but not least, from Dave Knaebel, we learned about the US government's work, perspectives, and priorities surrounding soil biodiversity and soil health. And in closing, on behalf of FAO North America, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today and for your great participation and engagement in this discussion. There are many excellent questions we did not have time to get to, but I assure you they will be shared with all of our speakers who can follow up with you at a later time. And I would, of course, like to thank our outstanding cast of speakers for their excellent remarks and insights. Please be on the lookout for additional events that we at FAO North America will be organizing this month and into 2021. Until then, and in the meantime, stay safe and stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.